pray for our time together, and we're going to kick right into this. So let's pray. Heavenly Father, it is an honor and a privilege to be able to gather here today and sing praises to your name and also study your word. Lord, as we do that and we open up your word and we reflect on it and learn from it, Lord, may we also be challenged and convicted by it. Lord, may your spirit just tug at us in such a way that we can leave here changed for your sake and your honor and your glory. And Lord, let us not waste this time together. Let us be able to not be distracted, but to be focused and zeroed in on what your word and what your spirit may have to say. This I pray in your son's name, Jesus Christ. Amen. Okay, I asked a question on Facebook over the past week. It was a really, really simple question. It was, pet peeves, do you have any? And it was basically, okay, Facebook community, I want them. I want your pet peeves. And I got several. Some people actually left comments, not a lot, but some. I got a couple of personal messages, and some people actually talked to me one-on-one a little bit. I even got to talk to our associate pastor regarding what his pet peeve was. And it's amazing the type of responses that I got. It was kind of fun. All the way from snapping gum and all the way to drivers driving slow in the fast lane, to where, and that's one of mine, and our associate pastor says his was, slow drivers in the fast lane. I'm like, yes, they do 50 and a 70. Get over or get off the road. There's side roads for that. Or the people that don't know how to merge fast. Or the light turns green and they sit. Or the light turns yellow and they don't get out there. I mean, don't they know 3 cars can get through when the light turns yellow? 3 cars can get, and if you're the first car, get out there, So it's that type of a, so there's so many pet peeves. Some people, it's nails on a chalkboard. My wife has said that she had 2. Someone sharpening knives just makes her teeth hurt, or someone that has a cordless phone, and they leave it next to the charger and the battery dies on the phone. and she's like, you're right there, just, yeah. Okay, and so I can't wait for the day that I don't plug her cell phone in, and I just leave it next to the charging station and it dies. I'm going to never hear the end of that. And so, but now here's one that is one of my personal extreme pet peeves, and that's seemingly, I have to preface this, seemingly educated people asking really stupid questions. Those are one of mine. It makes my eye twitch. Like, for example, I work sometimes at the bus station. And every now and then I run across a customer who seemingly is educated and a relatively smart person coming to me, asking me the stupidest question I could ever imagine. For example, I know you're curious. For example, New Year's Day, I'm working. It's a holiday. Okay, so I was there so everybody else can have off because they're all hungover. They're not going to be able to work anyways, and I'm fine New Year's Day. So I started in the morning, 6:30 in the morning. Actually, 6 o'clock in the morning, I'm there, ready to go. And so around 7:15, 7:45, in that neighborhood, I don't know the exact time, some customer came up to the window. And because it's slow, we have a bell up there that you ding the bell for service, right? So you ding the bell, and then I'll come up and I'll help you. So the bell rings, ding! And I work my way up to the front counter. And I say, hi there, what can I help you with today? And their question to me was, are you guys open? It makes my eye begin to twitch. And thoughts start running through my head. Thoughts of sarcasm. Like, nope, you're seeing a recording. Or whatever the case may be, right? It just makes my eye twitch. But I know sarcasm tends to be a bad thing to do sometimes. It's belittling the other person. It's not polite. So I hold it in. And I offer, yes, we are. What can I help you with this morning? And then they said, are you sure? Are you sure you're open? Now I decided he's asking for it. Sarcasm's okay now because I've already done the obviously. And so then he's like, "Are you sure?" And I could just feel this twitch. And so I let it out. My self-discipline was gone. And I looked down and I went, "If not, then being here was a real mistake." Yes, I'm sure we're open. And then I sold him a ticket. And so that's what we all have those, right? Where we have pet peeves and maybe we hold it in check. Maybe we hold it well until it just keeps driving at us. And it just keeps going and going, and pretty soon it just makes it harder and harder to control your tongue. And this is what we're going to see happening with Paul today in our text, is that Paul's going to be dealing with a demonically possessed girl following him around, annoying the daylights out of him, to the point that day after day, he's going to get so annoyed that eventually he is going to do something drastic. Eventually, the text is going to say that Paul gets so exasperated, so frustrated, so just annoyed with this girl that he's going to do something drastic. He's going to drive the demon out of her. To which then I would like to ask a different question. Why did he wait so long in the first place? Because a lot of commentators are all going to focus, a lot of them focused on, well, you see, this is why he got so mad. Or why was it that Paul, is this a weakness in his maturity level? And they're all looking at why he got so mad. But I'm like, why did he wait so long? Because in my mind, if you're Paul and you're doing a ministry and you see a woman bound by a demon, what are we supposed to do with captives? Set them free. That's what you do with captives. You free them. And he didn't free her. So I'd like to ask the question, why he waited so stinking long to free her when he should have done from the get-go. And so that's going to be what we're going to look at today. So we're going to be in Acts chapter 16. We'll be looking at verses 15 to 25. Allow me just to do a quick recap last week, because I know many of you are going to need it. And so last week, what we looked at was that Paul had a vision, a dream that said of a guy saying, come to Macedonia, help us here. So Paul interpreted that dream as God calling them to go to Macedonia and help them. And so he had a vision of a guy in Macedonia saying, come help us. When he gets to Macedonia, he doesn't know where to go. Macedonia is like saying going to Michigan. There's a lot of Michigan to cover. Where do you start? So he goes to Philippi, not the capital city, but pretty much the best city in the state, a.k.a. Grand Rapids. Okay, he goes to Grand Rapids, and he does ministry there. He could go to Detroit, but why? You know, they're making a movie down there. Ben Affleck's nearby. It's just all kinds of messed up. So let's just go ahead and go to Grand Rapids. It's like the best city anyways. And so he went to Philippi, a.k.a. a Grand Rapids type of place, and what he finds is not any men at all like his dream had, but just women. Not that the whole city was all women, but that's all that was worshiping God. There was no synagogue, so he had to travel a little bit around the city, outside the city, to different gates, and he found a whole bunch of women praising God there. And so of the women, he ended up working with Lydia and helped her plant a church, okay, in her home that she funded, which is kind of awesome. And here's what's also fascinating. Lydia is not Macedonian, she's Asian. She's from Thyatira, from Asia Minor. So here's what Paul has, a vision from God saying, a guy saying, come to Macedonia and help us Macedonians. So Paul goes there to find a woman who's Asian. You see the weirdness of this part here. This is kind of bizarre. And so that's where we left off, was Paul starting a church with an Asian woman and trying to start a church with a whole bunch of other women meeting in her house. Okay, so that's where we left off last week. Now, here's what we find out, that Lydia, eventually, she is going to offer total hospitality, and this is what allows the church to start in her home. Verse 15. And she and her household were baptized. That would be Lydia and all her anybody that's her family living there, as well as any servants she has, helpers, whatever. Because she worked with dyes and making linens of purple. She was fairly well-to-do, and so she would have workers there. So that would mean all of them as well. So Lydia is the head of her household, and we talked in detail last week about the women leadership issue and the debates that are taking place within society, and it was a lot of fun. And so here we have a woman who's the head of her household, and so she went there and said, hey, Jesus is awesome, and convinced everyone and told everyone, this is the religion of the home, take it or get out. And so everybody accepts Jesus, and they all get baptized. And so then she urged us, that would be Paul, Silas, Luke, everybody that's working with them, the Paul and Silas and company, and she urged them all, saying, if you consider me a believer in the Lord, come and stay at my house. And she persuaded us. Okay, so basically it's, if you believe that I really am a believer in Jesus, then come to my home, see it to be true for yourself. Come to my home and let's have me show you hospitality here. Come to my home and let's do some awesome things here. Okay, so this was that invite that she gives them. And it's interesting. How many of us would be that gutsy to say, hey, if you think I'm a Christian, come to my house and live with me for a while and see it for yourself? Okay, I mean, just think about that. How many people are that bold to be able to do that? How many people's lifestyles could actually meet that challenge? Okay, they're one thing when they go to work, they're one thing when they're out in public, they're one thing when they're at church, but when those doors close and the windows are closed and the blinds and drapes are closed and nobody knows what's happening behind those walls, is it still the same? And for Lydia, it was. For Lydia, it was. It was absolutely amazing, this woman, okay? And so what ends up happening is they continue having worship services out by the gate where they were originally meeting. They keep having prayer meetings out there. And so it's kind of the center of headquarters, if you will, is in Lydia's house, but they keep meeting out in the public. That's how services were. And what ends up happening is as Paul and company are traveling around the city of Philippi, as they're going from Lydia's house to the worship center to different areas of the city, they end up running across an interestingly possessed little young girl here, a demon-possessed girl. Check this out, verse 16. Once, in other words, one day, one of those days that we're there, as we were on our way to prayer, a slave girl met us who had a spirit of prediction. This is interesting. Underline that. Very important. This is going to set up the court case that's going to happen later. This is very important. We're going to have to spend some time on this just because it's necessary, not just because it's academic triviality. Okay, so there was a girl who met us. She had a spirit of prediction. She made a large profit for her owners. Notice the plural. Usually, who owns a slave? One person. She has several owners. That's interesting. Some people wonder if it's a husband-wife team, and some people wonder if she's like shared property amongst different owners because of her ability to be predictive and making profits for different companies. So maybe she consults and whatnot with other businesses. So she made a large profit for her owners by fortune telling. Now, we're going to have to talk about this a little bit. The Greek in that is literally pneuma puthona. Okay, that's literally what it's pneuma puthona. Of course, we all know what that means. Yeah, okay. Let me translate it for you. It means a python spirit. Isn't that interesting? It literally should be translated that she was possessed with a python spirit. Now, the Holman does a spirit of prediction. We'll explain why in a moment, but it literally should be a spirit of a python or a python spirit. Now, how does one even get a python spirit? Well, you have to get them at the Ministry of Walks. So in order to do that, what you got to do is that you have to go to the flying circus, go past the cave of Kananarbong, and then you need to go over to the knights who say ni, and you give them shrubbery, and they'll give you directions to the Ministry of Walks. Okay, wrong type of python. I'm gonna name this python spirit Monty anyways, just for fun. Okay, so no, here's really seriously what's going on is that a python spirit is from the term Pythonian spirit. Okay, now Pythonian spirit is a big part of Greek mythology. And what Greek mythology viewed is that a Pythonian spirit can predict the future. And here's how this works. There was a Pythonian oracle that was, there was a Delphic oracle guarded by a Pythonian, or guarded by a python. Some translations say dragon, but a serpent-like creature. So there's this Delphic oracle, and Apollos, the big god in Greek mythology, right? So Apollos, one of the big gods there, comes in and kills the python, kills the Pythonian spirit, takes the power of prediction for himself from that oracle, the Delphic oracle. And he ends up getting called Pythonian Apollos. Okay, Pythonian Apollos, because now he has defeated the Pythonian and taken the spirit of prediction to himself. So whenever a woman would claim to be possessed by Pythonian Apollo, she was called a Pythian. Okay, and that was a group of women that would be called a Pythian, or those that are possessed by the python or by Pythonian Apollos. Now, this might seem, like I said, like really trivial stuff, but this is very important to know that this woman who is possessed, what Luke is doing, not validating that she's actually possessed by Apollos, not that at all, but identifying how the culture was seeing her. how the culture in Philippi viewed this girl, that she was possessed not just by a demon. We would know it as just a demon. That's all she's possessed with. But the culture viewed her as being possessed by Pythonian Apollos. Okay, a Python spirit. She is one of the Pythian ladies. She is possessed by Pythonian Apollos. So she has, according to the culture, one of the big gods in her. Okay, so that's the situation of who's following them. Now we get to see what happens when Paul gets to confront Monty, the Python spirit, or the Pythonian Apollo spirit. Okay, so here's what ends up happening as the two go head to head, verses 17 and 18. As she followed Paul and us, okay, she's following them, she cried out, "These men who are proclaiming to you the way of salvation are the slaves of the Most High God." Let me pause here. True or false? True. Dead on the money, true. Important to know. This demon, this possessed woman, is not lying. Is she even exaggerating the truth? Not even a little. She is 100% true, which goes to show that just because someone's saying true, it does not mean they're a true prophet of God. Something to kind of keep in mind, that sometimes false teachers can say correct things. So we have to always have that element of discernment at play here, but she's saying something absolutely true. How long did she follow them? And she did this for many days. That's interesting. It's interesting. It's not just 3. It's not like it's a few days, but many days. We have no idea how many. A long time. Could even have been a week or maybe even 2. Who knows? It was a long time. She's constantly following them day after day. These men are slaves of the Most High God. They're preaching to you the way of salvation. These men are preaching the way of salvation of the message of the most true high God. And on she's declaring this day after day after day. But it continues on. Verse 18, Paul was greatly aggravated. He started getting annoyed. It started becoming a pet peeve for him. He started going, man, I wish she would just shut up. Isn't that interesting? Is she saying something wrong? No, but Paul's getting mad. Now you know why commentators focus so much on Paul getting mad, because why would he be upset with her declaring the truth? Because after all, if the demons are saying you're saying something right, doesn't that really validate your message? Doesn't that seem to really just say, hey, we're telling you the truth. This is God, and he gives you salvation. And the enemy saying, yeah, he's right. Why would you want that to end? That seems a little weird. And so that's why commentators focus on it. I have the question why he waited many days before doing it. So that's my question. We're going to answer both today. Sound good? Good. So he got greatly aggravated. He turned to the Spirit, and he said to the Spirit, I command you in the name of Jesus Christ to come out of her. And it came out when? Right away. Okay, so it came out right away. So then at that exact moment, it is now, after that, Paul and a young girl. No longer a girl with the pneuma puthonas. No longer a girl with a python spirit, okay? So now it's just Paul and a simple girl. Now, this brings us some very interesting questions. And that is, why did this even take place like this? Why did Paul wait so many days? And why did he finally just get annoyed? And I think that the answer we're going to come across is going to be the same for all of them. Let me just give you a couple of options people have given in the past. Some people, and I thought this was interesting, that it appears the demon was speaking to the crowd ahead of Paul and company, thus giving validation to the demon's ability to predict the future. Therefore, it is using God as a means to an end. So that she was not necessarily following them, but going up ahead of them, declaring the way, showing that she is worth her money. And that eventually Paul got so annoyed by this, he intervened. That's one point of view. I'm not anti that point of view. That's a very interesting point of view. So all these points of views I'm going to say are all possible. I'm actually not going to say that any of them are wrong per se, because I can't find a lot in the text to disprove any of them. It could end up being D, all the above. We'll see what happens here. So the second option is that Paul possibly was frustrated that he could be found guilty by association. It would be like if you're running for president and then the KKK supports you. Okay? What do you do about that? Because that looks bad. Sure, it's nice to have voters, but then you're turning off other potential voters. Right? Other people go, wow, if the bad guys like you, maybe I shouldn't like you either. Okay, so that's one also possible point of view. And that Paul got so frustrated with this guilty by association, he finally said, you know what, I'm done with this, get out of her. There, now we're not guilty by association anymore because the demon is now out of here. Now, I'm going to be more possibly thinking that this view could be likely incorrect because the Pythonian spirit, positive or negative in the eyes of the culture? Positive. So I don't know if there'd be guilty by association here with this particular situation because after all, she was making lots of people lots of money. Okay, so possibly not that second one, though I definitely understand it. I definitely understand the point of view, guilty by association. But then there's a third one, and this is the one where I'm going to kind of plant my flag. I'll write it in pencil. I reserve the right to erase it and change it to one of the other two. But this is where I'll plant my flag currently, and that is that the demon is confusing the message. Because who is the message from now? Okay, is it from God or is it from the demon? And are the apostles of God or are they possessed by demons too? And this gives the possibility that once you start blurring that line of what's called polytheism, and that is where you might add Jesus to your life, but Jesus doesn't change your life. Okay, because they're saying, hey, you can keep your religion. The demon's basically saying, hey, you guys, you can keep your religion, and if you like parts of Jesus, but then add that to it, what difference does it make? Okay, so it's kind of preventing true conversion. It's kind of, the demon is kind of possibly bringing about this polytheistic point of view, okay, of adding Jesus to your life, not letting Jesus change your life. So Paul gets annoyed. Paul gets frustrated with this because he's going to be about salvation, a total change made to a new tree, change right down to the roots. That's what Paul's looking for. And here's the demon possibly saying, you know, we're all on the same team here. It's like all road to the same mountain. It's a Finding Nemo theology. All drains lead to the ocean. Okay, it's that type of a thing. All roads lead to heaven. Doesn't really matter. And Paul's get frustrated and cast the demon out of her. But then why wait? And I think the answer comes when we see the response to what happens when the demon is removed from the little girl. That the girl no longer is able to predict the future. How does her owners respond to that? How would you be? How would you feel if you got yours? If you were a stockbroker and you had an ace in the hole, you had somebody that was gifted with understanding stocks and they could predict when companies were going to fall and you knew when to sell and when to buy and that you made millions every year, and then somebody comes by and then does something and suddenly your ace in the hole doesn't work anymore. Suddenly they don't have the ability anymore. They're costing you money. Now you're on your own. How mad would you be at the person that messed up your employee? You'd be ticked. You might even take that person to court. And that's exactly what happens. And Paul knew that once he cast out the demon of this little girl, his ministry would be over at that moment for a while. He knew he would end up being arrested, thrown into prison, and then having to deal with the court system, and that it would just disrupt the ministry from that point forward. So he waited as long as he could until finally he just couldn't do it, where he went Looney Tune and went, I can't stand it no more. Okay, and then dealt with that. Maybe, what was that, Popeye, not Looney Tunes? He eats spinach. I can't stand it no more. And then deals with eats the spinach and deals with the demon. so that's what happens here. So let's see this all take place. What we're going to find is that Roman colonies and Rome as a whole, they have an interesting pun problem. They care for possessions over people. Oh, come on, that's a good pun. Possessions. They own her. She's your property. She's a possession, but she's also possessed. Oh, come on. That's funny. It's a good pun. Possessions over... moving on. Verse 19. When her owners saw that their hope of profit was gone. Okay, and here again, we find a connection between demonic practices, occult practices, and money. It's amazing how often those two are together. When they saw that their hope for profit was gone, they seized Paul and Silas and dragged them into the marketplace of the authorities. Bringing them before the chief magistrates, they said to them, "These men are seriously disturbing our city. They are Jews and are promoting customs that are not legal for us as Romans to adopt or practice." So we got Jews, they dropped the race card. And then they say they're doing something absolutely illegal for our nationality, for our nation. Doing something absolutely illegal. Now, let me just kind of point some things out. First, they dropped the race card. They called them Jews. Okay, and this is important because before Paul ever got to Philippi, Clavis had kicked out Jews out of Rome. There was a big upheaval that had happened. They kicked the Jews out of Rome completely. And so now Philippi is what type of a city? Roman city. So they're going to be more sensitive to that. Because after all, we know how easy it is to know of a negative example of one case and apply that to other people. Of course, we don't do that. Americans are never guilty of that. We never have an experience with one ethnicity of people and then apply that experience onto the greater public. But that's exactly what ethnic prejudice does. It takes a negative experience that is truthful in one instance and then applies it to other people that were never involved with that experience in the first place. And then says that, hey, I can judge these people based upon. I don't like redheaded people because. I don't like Jews because, I don't like black people because, and on the ethnic prejudice goes. And so here they're making a point. We have Jews. That made everybody have red flags. Oh, they were kicked out of Rome. Now they're here. They left Rome and they're here. Well, we gotta do something about that. They're those foreigner Jews. They could start taking our jobs. We got to build walls. We got to do something about our borders. This is a problem. We got to deal with these Jews. And so they start dealing with that. And they bring that up. And then, of course, they say that the law was on their side. They're doing something illegal. And, of course, this is actually true. It is actually true, because here's the thing, that Augustus had made Apollo the head god and the chief god for all of the area. In fact, there was a battle in the Philippi region that Augustus had won, and they were building a temple in Philippi for Apollo. Now, the girl was possessed with what? A python spirit, but who did we find out that it really was, according to their view? Apollo. Which means then that Paul just showed that Jesus is greater than Apollo. Because Paul didn't drive out the spirit. Paul said, "In the name of Jesus." And the demon came out immediately. Because of the name of Jesus, which means Jesus is greater than Apollo. So right there, Paul just showed that their God, how's that going to go with the people? And so now this is showing that Jesus is the way, Jesus is the salvation. That means a lifestyle change, not adding Jesus to your life, but changing your life, changing your individual culture, which means changing your customs, which means they're doing what the law forbid. And so now they're in trouble. Now they're in serious trouble. So here's what happens. Paul and Silas are treated like the worst of criminals possible. Verse 22 and 23. Then the mob joined in the attack against them, and the chief magistrate stripped off their clothes. There, meaning Paul and Silas, not their own. Get that straight. Okay, they stripped off Paul and Silas's clothes, ordered them to be beaten with rods, that be across the back. Okay, so beaten with rods. After they had inflicted many blows on them, they threw them in the jail, ordering the jailer to keep them securely guarded. Receiving such an order, he put them into the inner prison and secured their feet in the stocks. And the stocks were oftentimes set a little farther apart because they had a rule in Rome. You could keep them far apart to help give pain in the ankles and the legs for so many hours in a day. Then you put them back together, and then you spread them back apart again. And so there they are in the stocks, these wooden stocks, for who knows how long. This is an activity that is only supposed to be done to non-Roman citizens and the worst of criminals, thieves and murderers. Okay, Roman citizens were never supposed to be stripped, never supposed to be beaten with rods, and never put in the inner dungeon, and never put in stocks. In fact, if you put a Roman citizen in those things, it's a criminal offense to the point of being arrested for doing it. Uh-oh. Paul and Silas are what? Oh, dear. They're Roman citizens. Interesting, who never says that? Paul and Silas. Isn't that interesting? They never once say, hey, you're taking off my underoos. I'm Roman. You know Roman culture and customs. You don't treat me like this. I'm a Roman citizen. He never voices a protest. And of course, people wonder why. I'll offer something really simple rather than taking a long, drawn-out view on this. Do you think the mob really cared at that moment about the truth? No. You think they would have even listened to them if they even spoke? No. And of course, that happens all the time, doesn't it? But of course, we are never guilty of that. We are never guilty of letting our emotions get the best of us. That blinds us to caring about the truth. You know, we never have that struggle. We can never could we ever believe that our siblings would lie to us when they call us on the phone. Never could we ever believe that any accusations against our children are accurate. Never could we ever, right? Okay, that's the situation. We, a lot of times, don't care about the truth. It's amazing how about 80% of news postings on Facebook are actually fake. Fake, completely fake. Well-written articles, websites made to look like the real thing, and what people do is they buy websites like usatoday.co.com, so that way they can make it look like USA Today. It even says USA Today in their website, but it's fake. 100% fake, saying that people are claiming things they never claimed, saying that people did things they never did, claiming that things are happening in the court systems that aren't even happening, and on it goes. And every now and then I'll run across one that my friends will post, and I'll post on there, oh, by the way, this is incorrect. A quick little Google search will bring you up to something called Snopes.com. Snopes is your friend, and you just type in the topic there and see if it comes up. And someone posted something about Social Security, and I'm like, man, this is completely fake. Every single one of these 12 points of Social Security, all of them are fake. None of these are real. And here's the research on this. And then every now and then people will unfriend me because they hate me because they think I'm in the system. And every now and then someone will really man up and say, thank you for setting this straight. And that's awesome. But that's how it is. People don't check it. It took me 3 minutes usually to disprove an article on Facebook. Just about 3 minutes. A quick little search and something comes up right away. And you can find out if something's fake. But do people do that? No. Why? Do they care about the truth? No. Why is it that they don't care about the truth? Because they're blinded by their anger. They hear a story and they get mad at it. And then that anger says, I can't believe this is true. Well, yeah, sit on that one for a minute. You shouldn't believe that that is true because it's not. But people will be like, oh my goodness, this is horrible, this is terrible, this is ridiculous. Yeah, you're right, it is. But too late, you're already sharing it with other people. Creating an army of people against something that's false. And that's kind of what's happening here. They're hearing a report and they're not investigating. They're not asking questions. They're not getting witnesses. They're not trying to figure out the answer. They're not even letting Paul and Silas speak. They just say, what? He's doing what? Well then, strip him, whip him, and throw him in jail. Okay, and that's what they did. That's what they did. And Paul and Silas take the moral high ground by saving that information until after the punishment's done. And then when someone talks to them and they say, hey, we're Roman citizens, they go, oh, snap. And it puts them on a better position. Because odds are, if they had said something right away, you think the judicial system's not corrupt? Do you think they might have found a way to discredit the Roman citizenship at some point and somehow? Oh, they might have. There might have been corruption. But once everything's all done and all the tensions have lowered, and then it comes out, it's the moral high ground. It changes things a little bit. And so that is what ends up happening. And so how is it that the response happens? How is it that they respond? Now, before we go into verse 25, let me share something else with you. What's happening at Philippi when Paul and Silas are in jail? Because after all, there's a what happening in Philippi? A church plant. And that church plant, though it is funded by Lydia, though it is predominantly run by women, and they're all still there, who are they right now missing? They're two guest speakers. They're missing their teachers. They're missing their men of God. They're missing their claim to fame. That would be like all of a sudden you guys all gather together and John and I are in jail. Sure, you guys are all here, and sure, it could go on. Dan could come up and he could lead worship and someone else could give us a message. Sure, we could make it happen. We'll just get, Alan up here and have him preach. Whatever the case is, we could be able to, we'd get it all together and it's fine. But you guys would be like, what's happening with John and John? They said there's never a John around when you need one. There's always a John around when you need one, but now there's not one around when we need one. And so what do we do? And so this becomes a question. What about the families? What do we do about my wife and his wife and my kids and his kids? And what do we do as a church about that? Because they're in jail. If they're in jail, they're not getting a what? Paycheck. Right? They're not doing their work. They've got a problem. So what ends up happening is we find out if you go forward into the Bible quite a ways to a book written by Paul called 2 Corinthians, and you go to 2 Corinthians chapter 8, verses 1 through 4, it talks about a time where the churches in Macedonia, a.k.a. Philippi, and Thessalonica, and a few others. Okay, the churches in Macedonia were dealing with a time of severe affliction and persecution. Paul was being thrown in prison, and they're without their leaders, and they're dealing with this hard, difficult, rough time of severe affliction. And Paul wrote that what the church of Philippi did, how did they respond to this? Did they grab a bunch of sticks and start rioting, picketing, and looting, acting like pirates rather than citizens? No, they're not Americans. They act better than that. Okay? They act better than that. And what they do is they gather all the money they can, and they worship with their money by giving it to the people in the church that are affected in negative ways. They look at the families that are involved and the people that are poor within their church, and they give it to the saints. And they worship with everything they have left. That's how they respond. Isn't that an amazing response? That's how that church responded. Now, knowing that the church is gathering money, what limited funds they have, and that they're pulling it. It even says that the poorest of the poor of the church were gathering what money they had and giving it to the poor. It was amazing that in the severe time of affliction that they all gathered together and worshiped with everything they had left, and they gave. Now we get to see how are the leaders responding at this time of affliction and suffering. Verse 25, and it says, about midnight, Paul and Silas were praying and singing hymns to God. How awesome is that? Singing hymns to God, and the prisoners were listening to them. How awesome is that? That their response to the darkest situation of their life, that they are being treated like the worst criminals, though they're Roman citizens, that they're being treated like terrorists, though they're not, though they're being beaten and they're being flogged and they're being put into jail and shackles, they're being humiliated by stripped naked and beaten that way. And on this is going for them. And their response is to sing praises to God. And this is so amazing because some people might look at that and go, where was your God yesterday? Where was your God a couple days before that? Where was your God when you're getting beaten? Where's your God when you got arrested? Where's your God when you're getting stripped naked and thrown into prison and here you are? Where is this God of yours? And yet they're saying praise be to God and they're singing praises to him. And that is the response that we really need to learn how to handle in our lives today, is not to respond like the world, but to respond like the church. That when everything is dark, everything is at its worst, that we will look at it and not just, I'm going to tell you something. Here's the difference of what a real storm is in life. A lot of people, they go through hardships and difficulties and they call that a storm. And in reality, that isn't. Because here's what it is. If you're going through hardships and difficulties, but you're managing it, it's not a storm because you're managing it. A real storm is where you do everything to your ability, including pray, and nothing's working, and the storm is still raging, and your boat's about to sink and capsize, and there's nothing you can do about it. Now we're talking about a storm. Now we're talking about the darkest part of night. And how are you going to respond? By complaining and worrying and griping and screaming and swearing and angry and driving like an idiot? Is that the response that we need to have? Or are you going to be able to stop and say, I'm going to take a moment, and despite the fact that I'm about to drown and my boat's about to sink and there's holes in the boat and there's nothing I can do about it, I'm going to sing praises to God because he's still in control. He's still a good God. Okay, and that is a hard response to have. And so I ran across such a response by somebody that was absolutely just phenomenal moment. There's a young woman by the name of Gloria. Okay, a young woman by the name of Gloria. She was pregnant with her third child. And while pregnant with her third child, she, during the pregnancy, got extremely afraid and extremely depressed. She looked at the world of what's happening in America. She looked around, saw the news. She looked around and saw all the events that are happening, all the devastation, the leaders that appear to be just the worst possible leaders you could imagine, future prospects of leaders that can't even bring yourself to vote for, and that there's no good option. And she just saw this world going into a crazy, messed up place, and she started to become afraid, saying, what type of a world am I bringing my baby into? I don't know if I want to bring my baby into this world. I don't know. And she was pregnant. She's holding her belly, and she's going, I just, maybe if I could just die. And she starts thinking horrible thoughts, wondering, what is it even worth living this world? How messed up it is. How could I bring a child into this? What type of life is my child going to see? If I love my child, and I do, I don't want him to suffer. Maybe if I end it now, that suffering won't take place, and that's really more loving. And she became really depressed. She would sit in the middle of her living room with all the lights off, all the curtains closed, just in utter darkness, and would just tremble in fear and cry in sadness and brokenness. Her husband had mononucleosis and was really sick and very weak and couldn't be there to help her or comfort her. He was part of a church, and the church was even under attack. They're trying to legally shut down the church. People are trying to stop the message of the church. They're getting death threats. And so she's like, my husband is sick and weak, and he can barely get out of bed. And this is a crazy, messed up world, and I'm pregnant with the child that's going to have to deal with this. And on a moment of strength, when her husband was feeling a little bit better, he worked his way down the stairs, sat down next to his wife in their dark living room, put his arm around her, and together they cried. And then they decided to take a moment, have a prayer, and together they wrote a song. And they wrote a song together that we all know. And this song is a phenomenal song about just how awesome God is. And that even though we have no idea what the future holds, even though we have no idea what's going to happen tomorrow, we can face those uncertain days because God lives. And that it is okay to bring a child into this world. That it's okay because life is worth the living just because he lives. Written by Bill Gaither and Gloria Gaither.